So, welcome to the fourth week of Lent. This week kind of feels like we're getting deep in the heart of Lent. Thinking about Lent, is anything sticking with us, and knowing that Holy Week is coming and we're going to face the rockier road of challenge and where Jesus leads us. In reading the text this week, I think Sue had a good read on it, in that, gosh, this text seems familiar, this chapter seems familiar. And as I thought about it, I have to admit, I think this chapter or its parallels in Mark and Luke are probably a part of Lent every single year that we study the Synoptic Gospels. There's something about this material found in Matthew 16, Mark 8, Luke 9, that seems particularly Lenty. I bet if I analyzed the study charts from the past years and took a look, probably every Lent we study a part of this material, because it talks about Jesus questioning the disciples about who he is. And then we didn't say this part out loud, but it's in the same material. It includes Jesus saying, you know what, for the first time, he says, I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to be betrayed, I'm going to face suffering and death. So that's part of the material. And then also part of the material is the use of the cross. And it's not referring to Jesus' cross, but the cross that we are called to bear. So very Lenty material today. So welcome to the heart of Lent, the deeper part of Lent. So let's take a closer look. The text opens today with Jesus sounding like a nervous leader. He says to the disciples, so what are people saying about me? And the disciples seem to have their ear to the ground, and they're able to respond. Well, some people think you're John the Baptist. Other people think you're Elijah. Some people think you're that prophet, Jeremiah, or some other prophet. And you might think that Jesus would then follow up with, oh gosh, the polls don't look good. What's our strategy? But instead, Jesus says, who do you say that I am? Very powerful spiritual question, great question to ask anytime, but particularly in the season of Lent. Who do you say that Jesus Christ is? Well, Rocky has been training and knows exactly how to respond. Peter says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus sounds like a gushing game show host. He says, right on! You've got it. You have totally nailed it, you might say. Jesus is just thrilled, especially in the Gospel of Matthew. And only Matthew has some follow-up material where Jesus praises his trainee, Rocky, or Peter. And, oh my goodness, Peter, you have got it, and you obviously have a connection to God because you did not figure that out on your own. God is really working within you to reveal who I truly am. And then there's all sorts of game show prizes that go along with it. Material found only in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus says, you are Peter, you are the rock, and on this rock, I'm going to build the church. So interesting first use of this new idea called church. Jesus says, I'm going to build the church on you, Peter, the rock, and you don't need to worry about the devil. You are connected to heaven, and I'm going to give you my keys. That's pretty powerful. Would you give your keys to just anybody? I had to think about it twice today in using it as a prop. Can I really go there? I wouldn't let Bruce give the keys just to anybody. So we had to have a discussion about that. I told Terry, my keys are over there. Just keep an eye on them, okay? But here's Jesus giving the keys to the kingdom to the disciples and saying, go ahead, drive the car. So right after this big experience of revelation that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, Jesus starts a next level of training. For the first time of 3 times, Jesus says, okay, I'm going to level with you guys. This does not end well. I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to face suffering, and I'm going to die. Then, if you're a synoptic gospel reader, been around the rodeo a few times, you may recall that your head might snap back because it's such a place of contrast. First, Peter gets it right. Jesus is the Messiah. But then after Peter learns of Jesus foretelling suffering, Peter says, not going to happen. That's not going to happen. We didn't read that part out loud. And then Jesus says to Peter, well, pretty famous line, get behind me, Satan. You are standing in my way. This is the plan. And your mind is on human stuff and not the divine mindset. And then Jesus says, here's the deal. If you want to be my follower, you cannot be self-centered. You cannot be human-centered. You need to have the divine mindset and carry your cross. Pretty Lenty material today. Wow. So it's about time, Lent. And you may notice that all the hymns this week have the word cross in them. So just getting that purple Lent vibe going a little bit more deeply to prepare ourselves for Holy Week coming up in a couple of weeks. Well, looking over this rich material across Matthew chapter 16, I found myself going to a place I had not planned to go, but I think it makes sense in looking at this material. And it's the topic of suffering. Ugh, do you really have to talk about suffering? Suffering. But the material points to suffering. It's almost like once Jesus realizes the disciples get who he really, really, really is, the Messiah, the Son of the living God, Jesus thinks they're ready for that next level of training, that Jesus is going to suffer. And Peter, like any of us, his first response to that information is not going to happen. Suffering sucks. It's terrible. There's no way you're going to suffer. And Jesus says, oh yes, suffering is a part of my journey. And then that last little bit there, and it's part of your journey too, suffering. I don't bring up the topic of suffering lightly. I don't bring up the topic of suffering to shame you or scare you. I just thought it may be important for us to talk about suffering, perhaps so that it doesn't outwit us, and so that perhaps we have a strategy for getting through suffering. So, suffering. Number 1, it's a thing. It's a terrible thing. Suffering. Please do not suffer needlessly. There's some forms of religion that makes it sound like you have to lash yourself in order to understand God. That's not us. Suffering is part of our lives. God does not want us to suffer. So I think we need to put the topic of suffering in a few different buckets to understand its complexities. The first bucket to talk about with suffering is Jesus was sent to alleviate suffering. number one. That's what salvation is. That is what good news is, to alleviate suffering. So please, if you are suffering, please don't think, oh, that's what it means. Everybody's got their cross to bear, and I just have to suffer alone. I have to suffer uncomfortably. That's what being religious is. Please, no. Step one is the elimination of unnecessary suffering. And prayers for everybody today, no matter what kind of suffering they're suffering. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. May all know the way of God to alleviate suffering. Bucket 2 of suffering. We suffer, it's a thing. Whether health and physical pain, and that's so miserable. And prayers for everybody today going through physical pain or mental health pain or relationship pain or the pain of anxiety. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers for that part of suffering, which is very, very, very real. Do not minimize it. That is part of life too. And so, part of life is figuring out how we get through that kind of suffering. The third kind of suffering I like to zero in on is the suffering that comes for a cause. And I think that's where Jesus is going when Jesus talks about your carrying a cross. At the beginning of Lent, Ash Wednesday, and the Sunday following, I asked you, do you think God has made you a healer? Do you think God has given you a call or a vocation to be a healer in your daily life? And I think you said yes. I don't know there was 100%, but I think it was near 100% of us who said yes. We have a vocation to be a healer. But we can't take that healing vocation lightly or only be a healer when the road is smooth. There is a next level of call. There is a progression that this text and Lent prepare us for. Being a healer when the road is rocky. It's then perhaps we have a next level of awakening, that God is not punishing us, that other people, when they don't understand good news or healing, aren't, we don't need to back off. We're not bothering or thwarting something in our work of healing. And our work of healing is showing up, bearing good news, and exemplifying the peace of Christ across as many terrains as possible. And good day or bad. And that is very challenging. So Jesus is preparing the disciples for that next level of being a healer, of being a creator of a kindness habitat. You may think, well, who wouldn't want healing? Who wouldn't want to live in a kindness habitat? Well, people on earth, for some reason, resist healing. And this can thwart us in our vocation of being healers wherever we are. But Jesus gives us tools to outwit our discouraging thoughts, outwit the devil, outwit pathologizers who are throwing cold water on possibility and situations because they just do not know good news. It's remarkable to me the number of times I think of a tiny illustration from my own life that relates to physical therapy, but here I go again. I thought of another one in the last couple of weeks. So across the last several of years, I've had 2 different rounds of physical therapy. So I have little exercises I do, and I'm supposed to do them every single day. So I mostly do them, and I really tried. I'm trying to set an example for all of you who are called to do little disciplines that are very boring and you can feel resentful about, and you think, why do I have to do this? Can I skip today? Can I skip today? Can I skip today? Do I have to keep doing this? So certain days I can be so, I am suffering. I am human, therefore I invent suffering too. I invent suffering. Do I really have to do my little exercises today? Do I really have to do my little thing? Yes, I will do my little exercises. And some days I'm just a robot and I do them without thinking. But some days, I am suffering. So one day I was doing the little exercises I'm supposed to do, and I was kind of like gritting my teeth. Not because I was, lifting weights or is that difficult. I was just gritting my teeth because I was just, crabby. So I was doing my little exercises, gritting my teeth, and then out of the blue, I had a thought. What if I love myself through this? It was like this big aha. What if instead of gritting my teeth, being resentful, do I really have to do this the rest of my life? I thought, I am going to love myself through, love that word, love myself through this. Well, changed my frame of mind. It was such a powerful thought, I kept thinking it across the day. And I thought, what if I love myself through this other thing? Wow, then it became kind of a mantra and I had to write it down. What if anything that comes my way, I have the mindset of, I am going to love myself through this. Wow. I don't have to wait until someday when I retire or things go away. I can do that right now. I can love myself through anything. Loving myself through anything. So, Jesus says don't be self-centered. Is that being self-centered? No, it's not. It's very practical application of something the Gospels love. Good news. It's foundational. Hello. Good news. All over the place in the Gospels. Well, what is good news? Is good news some esoteric theoretical thing? Or is good news a reality for me personally? See, there's a progression. There's a progression in spirituality and theology and growing as a human being. And step one in our religion is believing good news. Do I really believe good news? And good news is not off in some kingdom or on vacation. Good news is every day. Good news. And good news is not theoretical. It's the truth of God's love, God's mercy, God's compassion. Not theoretically for somebody way off there, but for me and for you. It's absolutely true. God's mercy, God's love, God's justice, God's safety and habitat and kindness is right now. Why not avail myself of it in physical therapy and whatever else is going on? So there's various things that we can say to remind us, oh yeah, good news. And one day last week, it was, I can love myself through whatever it is. I can love myself through whatever it is that's going on. That is the starting point. It is the foundation. And then from that, I can move to do harder things, like carry the cross, bear the cross. That kind of thought helps me grow, helps me train to do harder things. And that's what the text shows today. First, the disciples had to get it. Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Okay, got that. Foundational. Don't forget it. Still hard to bear in mind. And then from that, the Messiah is headed to the cross. So don't bear your cross without the knowledge of God's good news and love and care for you. Also, don't stop there. Keep going. Use that knowledge to do greater things. You know, the Greeks have a saying about happiness. They say that happiness, the definition of happiness, is using our excellence for a higher purpose. Using our excellence for a higher purpose. That is the way happiness is found. And that's totally the gospel. Through that, we got the good news, then follow our call to bear some things, to show up, to look out for others, to serve, to not be about ourselves, to be skeptical about climbing a ladder or having a big bank account, or that it's about appearances and popularity. It is so not about that when you are a follower of Jesus Christ. It hit me this week, it's not about winning. It's about perseverance. Perseverance. Learning to climb on rocky soils. Jesus gives us the strength and the training to do hard things. And isn't it great we're part of this training grounds called church? That this text points to the start of the church. I was thinking church is a place where we bolster each other, we share tips, we remind each other of the good news when one of us is down and we need a little reminder. It's really difficult training, but it's possible. And we are called to work in difficult terrains. And through that, we find our happiness. To God be the glory. Amen.